The angel of the bottomless pit, Apollyon. I'm going to connect him tonight to Apollo and show ancient sources that claim Apollo is the father of Horus. I've already shown last episode that Horus is Hauron, a god found from Mount Hermon. If Horus's name was Hauron in the land of Canaan, Apollo's name was Reshef, the Phoenician Canaanite god of war and plague, just like Apollo, the god of war and plague. We're going to end this episode on the comparisons of Horus and his father Reshef, and we're going to compare it to Nimrod and Ashur, the first types of Antichrist, and those men who started the pagan cults, Nimrod at the Tower of Babel, and Ashur who went forth to Nineveh and did the same type of activity. So hold on, because this episode is going to get crazy. Alright, welcome back. I'm Zach, and ladies and gentlemen, do I have a real interesting one for y'all tonight, because God has given me another awesome episode, and it's mainly on exposing the enemy, one that we call the destroyer, Apollyon. So before we get going, I wanted to start off with the cross, praise God, and a thank you to my God, to our God, Jesus Christ, for helping me and guiding me with this awesome episode. I pray for God to bless all of us, all of you, with a deeper understanding and a deeper relationship with Him. So with that in mind, praise our God, let's start the show. Alright, our topic tonight, Apollyon, the destroyer, angel king of the bottomless pit. Is he a god of Mount Hermon or Babylon? Why do I ask that? Because as we'll be going over, I have found ancient sources that tie him into being the father of Horus, aka Hauron, from our last episode, just last week. So if that is the case, that means that we and I have a ton of new information to identify this angel king who will rise from the bottomless pit. How will we identify him? Well, the Bible narrows it down to 5 Antichrist kings who have lived at the time it was written back in Revelations and died. So 5 that had at that time lived and died, and it says one of those 5 will live again, and that is found in Revelation 17. I'm going to slow down. We'll get there. We'll develop that idea much more fully. Revelations 9:11. They were ruled by a king, the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek it is Apollyon. I believe that he is connected to ancient gods known by many names across many cultures, whose stories echo through time, from the mountains of Hermon, the fertility temples in Dendera, Egypt, to the temples of Babylon. And we're going to go through quite a lot of those. Could he in fact, like many biblical scholars say, be an echo of Apollo, or actually be Apollo, the ancient Greek god of plague, archery, healing, like the Rephaim healers, and prophecy? Both names, Apollyon and Apollo, share obviously a striking linguistic similarity. Apollyon, the destroyer, and Apollo, the shining god. But could their connection go deeper? Apollo was known as a god who killed the great snake Python, like many ancient heroes. And according to Homer and Hesiod, was the far shooter, an archer, and the raiser of armies, amongst many other things. Kind of like the beast in Revelation that rises from the sea. It rises from the sea of people, and it rises up, it raises up, it rouses up a nation, it rouses up an army. But Apollo's wrath was feared just as much as his blessings were sought back in those days. And even in these days, if you see what's going on behind the scenes, they're looking to the serpent to get what they want out of life, right? It reminds you of that famous rap star that we're seeing right now. We'll do a video on him later because he's tied into Balaam. Just think of what Balaam did. That's the same process we're seeing today. So back to the question. Could Apollyon represent the darker, destructive side of this ancient god, Apollo? And if so, amongst many other things, amongst him being the father of Hauron, we're going to be able to find much more identifiers, much more characteristics, much more information to solve this great mystery of who is this destroyer, this angel king, Apollyon, from Revelations 9. So let's take it further back beyond Greece to Egypt. Before that, Mesopotamia, where we have from our last episode Hauron, which is another name for Horus, an ancient god also tied into healing and protection, which ties him also like Apollyon, Apollo, to the Rephaim, the healing aspect, Rapha, being that root word meaning healing or healer. Hauron is also known for his fierce, destructive nature and his myths. In last episode, we dove deep into Hauron's presence on Mount Hermon, a place that's been steeped in paranormal encounters, and it's been often linked to the fallen watchers. I have found information that ties this Hauron/Horus of Mount Hermon to Apollo, the seeming namesake of Apollyon the Destroyer. It seems the ancients believed that Apollo was the father of Horus, aka Horus the Elder, and Horus the Younger was the cross between this shining one and a female Isis who had, just previous to this, lost her husband Osiris. This would be fitting that Horus tie into Mount Hermon and his father be Apollyon the Destroyer. Where else is a more appropriate place than Mount Hermon of Enoch, where the angels came down, made mutual curses that they would, as big part of the plan, conceive children who would rule the earth? What other story would be more appropriate than the Destroyer himself creating hybrid children on Mount Hermon that became the false god set of every culture? They ruled over Egypt, Greece, practically everywhere. So, that same question, could Apollyon be more than just a name or a fanciful story? Could he represent an actual hidden truth, a god who spans cultures, times, places, from the heights of Mount Hermon to the depths of Babylon's history? As we tie this back to Revelation 9:11 over and over again, we begin to see that Apollyon may not simply be only the angel of destruction, but rather a much older figure who has worn many names throughout the ages. As we delve deeper into this mystery, we must ask, is Apollyon the god of Mount Hermon, while also the god of Babylon? One, both, neither, more than both? As we will see, Apollo is the father of Hauron, and so one question in the back of my mind during this episode, creation of it, was, did Hauron originate at Babylon or at Mount Hermon? And what ancient powers and information does this destroyer, his child, his mythology hold? I know, hidden under layers of mythology and interweaving storylines, this story's been waiting to rise again, like him, from seemingly the bottomless pit. Stay tuned as we uncover the mysteries of the Destroyer and trace his connections through ancient lore to the final battle prophesied in the end times, through this unique lens of me happening upon Horus at Mount Hermon. Before we start, I wanted to roll the clip of what I just watched tonight, a few hours ago, Tuesday night, September 24th, around 9:30 p.m., because I feel like when God gives us people who are studying the Bible the same lines of information. I've seen this watching different pastors. I've been given information that God wanted me to receive. It's interesting. It means to me that we're on the right track. It means that I'm on the right track with information if other brothers are finding the same thing. So I want you to check out the video that I just came across from our money sign E, otherwise known as Round Saturn's Eye, just today. I started this research into Reshef, who you'll see is Apollyon, just a short week ago while doing this episode on Hauron. So I'm going to play a short clip of what we'll be going into detail in here just a little later. Apollo was known as Reshef in Mesopotamia. Reshef was a god from before they made it from Babylon to Egypt. I want to show you this quick preview because it's important and will help tie everything together. Alright, do you see Reshef here? Also known as Apollo by the Greeks, right here. As we scroll up, do you see on his forehead is what looks like a stag. As we scroll down, we'll start to see more images of this gentleman. As we zoom in there, he has a stag or a gazelle on his forehead. And further down again, we have this entity that will remind us of the horned god Cernunnos, the namesake of CERN, the gateway, the dimensional portal that is built over a temple to Apollo in Switzerland, and I believe it's also France, which is certainly a shadow or a reminder of the opening of the bottomless pit. And as we scroll up to here, we'll see he's the equivalent of Luwian Runtia, which is a gentleman with a close connection of a deer. And then you see in this context equivalent of being goats or stags, tying us into goats, tying us into stags. We know the goat with Azazel, Leviticus, and such, and this stag god being the god of the wild that we find in many different countries, especially within, I know of Europe. So all of this is to preview, because I believe God is revealing stuff to me, to us, and others, information that is coming together quite rapidly. So with that being said, let's go ahead and watch Mr. Round Saturn Eye clip.
Hi folks, I hope you're all well. In this video we're going to see a clearer picture of the agenda of Babylon. In a few moments I'm going to show you a TV commercial that was released by Glenfiddich, and this commercial shows us a clear picture of the humanistic self-elevation, the philosophy that underpins the rise of the Antichrist. And so I'll show you that in a few moments, but just to introduce this, I want to just really help you today to understand the nature of this world, of this reality that we live in. Folks, we are in a spiritual battle, and I don't think sometimes we always realise the extent of that. I mean, the Bible tells us that our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against principalities and powers in high places. And that is truly what we're facing. And, you know, we go about our day-to-day lives, and maybe it doesn't always feel like that. But I tell you, we are surrounded by souls. We are surrounded by eternal souls. If you are a Christian, you are a fisher of men. And that is who Jesus is. He comes to save and rescue souls. But there's also another one. There's also the devil. He comes and is hunting. He is hunting for souls. He's hunting to bring souls into destruction. And he blinds the minds of unbelievers. Now, who was it? Who is the figure in the Old Testament that was referred to as the hunt master, or as the mighty hunter? Can you think who that is? Yes, Nimrod, the mighty hunter, who was that first prototype of the Antichrist. He was referred to as a mighty hunter. He was a hunter for souls. And that's what you see here, the hunt master, the horned god like Apollo, and that is what this is depicting. Okay, so let's watch this Glenfiddich commercial. It's just a short one, but this will show you the humanistic philosophy of the Antichrist, of the new Babylon, and that is exactly what we're seeing being pushed in our society as we get ever closer to the Beast Confederation.
And lets us play with maybe. It searches for patterns and ways to experiment. A mind that's mastered its...
Really showing you there this humanistic philosophy, the philosophy of the Antichrist, about climbing up that Tower of Babel in defiance of the Creator and the collective efforts of humanity to unite in defiance of God. The stag leading you into a false spirituality, and the stag as a representation of the horned god. It explodes when they create this new creation, this artificial new creation. You see that it then splits and splits, and then it explodes in space. And then we go into this, it's like a big bang again, this artificial new creation. Remember, the Antichrist counterfeits God in so many ways. Here is their false god. And that's what it morphs into. It morphs into their false god Apollo, which is essentially a reference to Nimrod. Apollo, Nimrod, that false horned god, that Alpha, Aleph figure, the leader, the ox, that is the false one. It's a counterfeit of God. It plays God. It pretends to be as God, as it says, in the New Testament prophecies about the man of sin. And remember, the secret societies within Romanism, this is their false gospel, to bring their false Messiah through the veil into our world. And with it, this idea in the narration that the beast is going to take the world beyond convention and break mankind out of the box and set us free through a false illumination, just like in the Gnostic doctrine.
So as you see, Round Saturn's Eye had some very pertinent points to our study, and awesomely, thanks be to God, our studies are tying together. So we're going to hop into Revelation 17 and scroll down and start at verse 7 to study up on who this Apollyon is, who these entities are that are coming out of the bottomless pit. And we've already seen that in Revelation 9. But let's go ahead a little bit further in the book to Revelation 17, verse 7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou saw was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So here we have some of our qualifiers that we need. The beast king must have already lived and reigned as an antichrist figure upon the earth, based upon he was, he is not, yet he will live again, ascending out of the bottomless pit. And who was this first antichrist post-flood? If you've watched Rob Skiba, read Genesis 10, or paid attention to that Round Saturn's Eye clip, we will know that Nimrod himself was the first Antichrist post-flood. And that directly after Nimrod in the fall of the Tower of Babel, Ashur went forth in the pattern in the blasphemy of Nimrod and created the city Nineveh. He created a name for himself as the little g god, Ashur. Here we can see him in his little sun disk flying over the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Here, he's being worshipped by men. And here, he's being worshipped by Nephilim, or are they angels? Cute little birds. Why do I mention Nimrod and Ashur? In a study of Horus and his father Reshef, aka Apollyon, because they started off as gods beyond Egypt, before Egypt. They are more recognized in Cyprus, in Mesopotamia, in Sumer. And if the Bible is true, this means that Apollo and Horus became gods sometime around the end of the Tower of Babylon, which is highly important because once again the Bible reveals a chilling truth. The final Antichrist and his false prophet are not random figures, but ancient rulers, Antichrist kings, who once walked the earth in ages past. They are kings who ruled with power, deception, darkness. But here's the terrifying twist. One of them will rise again to rule over them all in the last days. Who are these kings, and how is it possible that one of them will return from the shadows of history to dominate the world once more? The prophecy in the Bible is crystal clear. These aren't new players in the cosmic war between good and evil. They are figures from long ago, waiting for their moment to reemerge, more powerful and terrifying than ever before. Could it be that that final Antichrist has already ruled, tasted power, and vanished, only to reappear at the end of time? And when he does, will he be crowned as king over all the kings of darkness? The Bible does limit the scope of this end times ruler. He's not some new threat, but he is a dark and ancient force that has already been known. His return will signal the final showdown as he and the false prophet usher in an age of deception, chaos, and ultimately destruction. The question remains, which ancient king will rise again, and will the world be ready to face him? And it's my understanding that Apollyon might be the false prophet and the beast king be this gentleman, to clear that up. Excuse me for recapping, but this information is highly valuable, highly important, and it's new to me, and I know that by doing it over and over again and looking at it from different ways, it's going to help lock this into our brains, so please bear with me. Last episode, we showed that Horus came from Mount Hermon, correct? Which matches with fallen false religion starting in Babylon, moving to Nineveh with Ashur, and then down to Egypt and beyond after the Tower of Babel. When we add that his father was Reshef, aka Apollo, it further shows that these gods sets started outside of Egypt, somewhere at least towards Canaan and most likely towards Sumer and Babylon. As Reshef is clearly attested, as we said many times, Cyprus, Mesopotamia, Sumer, many other places before Egypt. So based on the Bible, I know I can get closer to the truth by figuring out who these gods were that entered Egypt and Canaan, and then find those connections to the Bible. So let's start with our first possibility for Antichrist, Mr. Nimrod himself. And so Nimrod is the son of Cush, who is the son of Ham. Okay, so Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah. And we'll start at verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, the Tower of Babylon, and Uruk, and Akkad, and Calneh, and the land of Shinar, where the tower was. Out of that land went forth Ashur, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city. And so what we're seeing here is Nimrod built his blasphemous tower, the Tower of Babel, right? And then God came down, he judged the tower. Something also seemed to happen to Nimrod at about this time. And then out of that land went forth Ashur. And strangely, this is the only gentleman that I've noticed is outside of his birth line. So we're talking about the sons of Ham. Mr. Ashur is a son of Shem, right? And Shem had Arphaxad, who leads us down to Abraham. Elamites would be our Persians, our Iranian friends. And so what we're seeing here is the patterns and identifiers for our first Antichrist and our second Antichrist, from Babylon and then Assyria, respectively. So let's dive into connecting these characters with Mount Hermon, with its district Hauron, which is another name for Horus. Let's go. So let's start off with where we left off last episode, Hauron, and then see where God leads us. And we'll look at how I found this gentleman, Reshef. If you remember last episode, I brought forth evidence that Horus was possibly originally from Mount Hermon before migrating to Egypt, making him a child of El or Baal, which matches up with tonight's study showing that Horus is a child of Reshef, aka Apollo, Apollo being a son of Zeus, and we know that Zeus matches up with either Baal or El. This connection was originally brought forth through the name of Hauron, which connects etymologically to the Hauron region of Mount Hermon, which was also connected to Horus and connected to the Sphinx of Giza. If you have not watched last week's episode titled Esau and the Mystery of Hauron, I highly suggest you watch it. This is a quick review of Hauron before we get to Apollyon, aka Reshef, in more detail. So as we click here, here is the Hauron region containing Mount Hermon. Funny enough, when you look at it, you'll see, as we showed last episode, here's our Mount Hermon. Here is the Hauron district, and there's a lot of other ties I can't get into. Funny enough, these gentlemen right here are the ones who are running the show, and they have the star that you would see people in lodges, as you would call it, masonry. They hold secretive beliefs that are the current You see, they hold the faith secrets. They're not permitted to marry or talk about it. Okay, and those are the people who are running the Mount of the Fallen Angels. But let's take it back to Hauron and his fallen angel daddy. In Egyptian context, Hauron can be associated with Harmachis, which is right there, Horus. The modern spelling of this theonym is a Hellenized form of Harim Makid, right? Horim, like the Horims, the Horites, which means Horus in the horizon. This god was associated with the Great Sphinx of Giza, referred to with his name from the period of the New Kingdom on. The name of Hauron himself could also be used as a designation for this monument. So let's go ahead and right-click on this Harmachis and see that it basically says, so Harmachis is Horus, he's the falcon, and here's something interesting that I want to look at. So we see down here his Greek equivalent is Apollo. So this is Horus. Remember, there's Horus the younger, Horus the older. Let's talk about it. This gentleman here, Claudius Aelianus, wrote that the Egyptians called the god Apollo Horus in their own language, elaborating further on the same tradition reported by the Greeks, specifically that the one Horus whom the Egyptians equated with the Greek Apollo was in fact Horus the elder, who is distinct from Horus the son of Osiris and Isis. That would make him the younger. So what this is saying is the Greeks believe that Apollo himself is most likely Horus the elder. Apollyon, this angel king who's now in the bottomless pit, is the same as the other angels who committed those types of sins with women, are all locked in. Okay, he's there because why? Because he had this child named Horus, most likely. Apollo, once again, being a son of Zeus. So let's go look at this work by Claudius Aelianus. So here's this gentleman's book. It's Aelian on animals, or the characteristics of animals. The Egyptians appear to regard the hawk as sacred to Apollo, calling the god Horus in their own language. And so this book was written around 200 AD. Okay, so Apollo is Horus in their own language, and they regard the birds with wonder and are right in saying that they belong to the aforesaid god. For hawks are the only birds that can stand and face the sun with ease and without pain from the rays of the sun. They're not the least dazzled. And while they fly at an immense height, the divine fire does not trouble them. And the bird can swim on its back, or fly on its back like a man swimming, and stare at the sun. And at the sky, the all-surveying sun, with complete freedom and without flinching. This bird, the hawk, the Horus, the Apollo, is the enemy of snakes and venomous creatures. So we see like the same thing that Apollo, we know from the Bible that Apollo is able to send the destroyer, send the snakes, right? He is the snake. He's also used as in protection spells from these entities. Okay, and it says that hawks don't eat fruit or such, they drink blood and eat meat. Interestingly enough, it also goes into about how its leg attracts gold. So it's like a magnet, and that's what the stone of Herclea is here, is actually a magnet, which bewitches iron. Okay, the Egyptians are saying something about the possibly living for 500 years, and here's where we see something else that's interesting. Homer, they say, seems to hint that the hawk is the beloved child of Zeus and Leto, for example, Apollo, when he says, "And down the hills of Ida he went like a swift hawk, the slayer of doves." So that's very interesting. We're going to have to skip past the amazing question of exactly where Mount Ida was. Where is Mount Ida? Could Mount Ida have been Mount Hermon? I think that's a very good possibility. So here we have Horus, son of Zeus, Horus as Apollo, the elder, which is said by Plutarch, specified by Plutarch, saying the same exact thing. Apollo being Horus, but also Apollo giving birth to the Horus. And I'm going to have to do another episode on this. I can't sort through all of it now, but remember that Osiris died before Isis magically conceived with an obelisk-like thing, which is in the shape of a you-know-what, This ritual itself had something to do with this entity base and these serpent fertility cults, as found in my episode of the same name. So the question is, is Apollo the one that the Isis actually had the baby with? Or contrary to that, could Apollo be the child that was born from this magical union of serpents, hairy hominid creatures, and all these animal-faced little g gods? Please watch my episode titled Serpent Fertility Cults and Dwarves for more information. So as we look at equivalence over here on the right side, and we did go over about how it points to Apollo, we scroll down. Mr. Apollo here, patron deity of Delphi, the Delphic oracle, which was the oracle of the serpent. So he speaks in the mouth of the serpent, just like another church has a building. They speak directly out of the mouth of the serpent. As we scroll down, we start to see his equivalence here. And so we've gone over Horus, and we've heard about Reshef. And where's Reshef from? Phoenician equivalent. Now, why are we going to look at that one? Because our guy Hauron seemingly came from there, the land in and near Mount Hermon. So let's see what other connections that we have there. Let's look at this gentleman's image. And as we come to Reshef, we look again and see once again he has that stag on his forehead. And we scroll down and see once again that gazelle type entity. Remember, he's known as the stag guy, the goat guy. Okay, and we'll go to this one that we skipped. Open that in a new tab. And this one is insane. It tells quite the story. The entity on the right is our gentleman Reshef. Okay, and I'm going to superimpose the other image on him to show you that. The entity on the left, who's just excited to see you, that is the father of Bes. Bes is this hairy hominid creature who seems like a dwarf, maybe a giant, because it could just be squat proportions, who's involved in the temple of Hathor. Hathor being the house of Horus, and then where the baby Horus was born. Okay, so all these things are starting to tie together. So we have here on the left the father of Bes, here on the right the father of Horus, here in the middle is this entity that they're calling Kadesh, which in Hebrew is like Kadesh, which means holy. So this is like a holy, sacred union of the gods, which was practiced at Babylon, Esagila, which we'll get into in this or next episode, and multiple other things. The animalistic hominid Bes, the child of this man on the left, was found all over Hathor's temple in Dendera and on the hieroglyphs found in front of the Sphinx and throughout all of Egypt. So let's take a moment just to see how similar these stelae are. And so as we go and start looking, we can start to see that we have multiple different what are called Sippi. These are magical stela, just like Apollo, Reshef, right? They were, even though they were the gods of plague and destruction, they were prayed to not be destroyed, right? So you have these magical stelae that also are used, they believe, to help them with snake bites and things of that nature. So there's many of them, as I'll keep pulling up quite a few here. Look at that. We have Horus. Maybe that's Horus the Elder with the eagle head. Left to him is Isis. In the center we have our young Horus. And Horus the Elder is probably Apollo, left to him with the eagle head. On the right is Thoth. He's standing over these crocodiles, right? And all above him is all these magical spells. And let's go ahead and Wikipedia her. Kadesh was a goddess who was incorporated into the ancient Egyptian religion in the late Bronze Age. Her name was likely developed by the Egyptians based on the Semitic root Kadesh, right, meaning holy or blessed, attached that as a title of El and possibly Atarat, found from texts in Ugarit. So not a lot of clear references to Katesh. She's considered an Egyptian deity influenced by religion and iconography of Canaan. Right? So this whole cult, this whole god cult of this Apollo angel coming down doesn't seem like it was started post-flood in Egypt. It seems like it came into Egypt. And you'll find a lot of things, right? The Lady of Heaven, the Mistress of all gods, Lady of the Stars, Beloved of Ptah, right? Great of Magic, like Hecate, Mistress of the Stars, and Eye of Ra. When you look at the temple of Dendera, you see that they were working in this bottom of the serpent cult with an entity called Hecate in the Greek, who's the goddess of witchcraft. And in this Egyptian temple, she's the goddess of helping to bring forth this Nephilim Horus, who was born from the destroyer and this woman after her husband died. You know, her husband was a ruler, and I'm sure she saw power slip through her fingers. And what better time for the devil to come in to make you help you make a terrible decision, right? She's wearing a Hathor wig. Hathor means the house of Horus. I think this probably is the Isis. This probably is the Hathor. You know, it's that same goddess. This is just another name for her. And what is this? This is a descriptive name, that she's holy. She's taken part of this divine union. That's how Alexander the Great was born of a divine union. That's how Nebuchadnezzar was born of a divine union. All of their mothers were found inside temples, supposedly on the day when the god came down, when a god came down and had them. Very interesting. Wouldn't you say? And so as you look, she's constantly found together with that entity Reshef, and then also Min, who's the father of Bes, and we'll shoot a couple more clues at you here. Centered around Coptos, okay, celebrating his coming forth, interestingly enough, and then found in the eastern desert. The links to the god Horus. So if Horus is coming from Canaan, if Horus is coming from Babylon, along with Apollo, they would be more of the eastern flank of things, which entrance into the land of Canaan. His importance grew in the Middle Kingdom, where he became more closely linked with Horus and the deity Min Horus. So what is actually going on? He was fused with Ammon in the form of Min Ammon, who was also the serpent Urta, the bull of his mother, a god who fathers himself with his own mother. And we know that's what was going on in that Egyptian mystery cult. As the central deity of fertility and blank rites, men became identified by the Greeks with the god Pan. Wow, here we are back at Esau and these satyrs again. Back in the land of the Saturns, where Genesis 14, the War of the Kings, shows that they went through and took out these entities. Okay, where they were in the land, then they came down to Egypt, right? And then men, who is this? Who in all actuality is this gentleman? Here's a satyr, right? He's a father of a best satyr. The Greeks associate him with the god Pan. And then here we have Reshef, who is known as the Destroyer. Are these all gods? And then they fooled this young lady? Someone help me. You know, I'm getting deep in it. I need a little help. But very interesting nonetheless. Very interesting. So let's pop back over to our buddy Horus, closely associated with Harmachis, who we can quickly show is Horus. Right? Horims, the Horites, the satyrs. So now we're tying up with the satyrs again with the name Hor. That's how we got here. Okay, used interchangeably, and his name as a result could be used as the designation of the Great Sphinx of Giza. So, we can go ahead and take away all the theories of Graham Hancock and such being 12,000 years, because obviously these entities had the ability to move their own water. If you can build such a beautiful thing as this right here, you could also move water into the Sphinx enclosure. We don't have to go back 12,000 years. Why is the Great Sphinx of Giza? He's named after a fallen angel. I don't think a fallen angel child story lasted since 12,000 BC, 10,000, whatever they want to say. It was most likely this period of this side of the flood. maybe based upon a story from the previous side, the other side of the flood, right? While Egyptologists were familiar with Hauron since the 1800s, his origin was unknown, and in the 1930s it was established he originated outside of Egypt. Today is agreed that, like we keep saying, an Egyptian form of a god worshipped in Canaan and further north in the city of Ugarit. And we've done quite a few, especially my Baal episodes, we really got deep into the Ugarit. So here, once again, scholarship is tending to agree that Horus came from Canaan down into Egypt and not the other way around. And why is that important? Well, when we go back and read our Bible, it says in Genesis 11, the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, this is coming off the ark, right? This is coming off Mount Ararat. They found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime for mortar. And they said, go, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach up to heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, from which they imagine to do. So go, let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. They stopped building that city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad from the face of the earth. So these God-set stories, the stories of these false gods, were brought from the Tower of Babel, from Nimrod, and not the other way around. See, the righteous humans at this time would have already left Nimrod and his blasphemous kingdom. The righteous would not have gone out recreating and modifying the patterns of Nimrod, the rulership of Nimrod. But in the Bible, we have an example of who did go out and recreate these Antichrist religion of Nimrod. And that's once again our dude Ashur here, who went forth from Babylon and built his own city, Nineveh. And this Ashur, found strangely and uniquely under a man not his father. As we said, he's under Ham and Cush because of how he acted. He became his own god, and the city the Bible says he built, Nineveh. We find in Nineveh the little g god named Ashur on flying discs in the mythology and such. If biblical Ashur is indeed the son of Shem, we should see his interaction with the false deity Nimrod in other places. It should be in the pattern of Ashur copying Nimrod. As the Bible states, Ashur went forth from Shinar, Babylon, and created Nineveh. And I believe this is found in Ashur versus Marduk. Remember, we started off with the evidence with a god named Hauron, Horus, being born to an entity named Apollo. To highlight our connections to Hauron and his father Apollo being Reshef from Babylon, and then being found in Egypt in that order, started from Babylon, Canaan, and then to Egypt, we will start and check out this awesome article. And we are going to find it in JSTOR, The Relation of Marduk, Ashur, and Osiris by Sidney Smith, written in 1922. And this is a very exciting article written over 100 years ago, which I think us Bible students are still working on. So very awesome stuff. Let's look at it. The question of the relation of the civilizations of Egypt and Babylonia, often discussed, has most frequently been considered from the material aspect, and there is slowly accumulating archaeological evidence to show that the two ancient states had many things in common that trade intercourse alone cannot be held to account for. On this strictly archaeological argument, various authorities are likely to base varying interpretations. So during the war, a quantity of most important religious texts has been published by Dr. Ebeling, and from those texts, certain facts have come to light which necessitate an entirely new view of the two great gods of the Euphrates and Tigris valleys, Marduk and Ashur, right? So we know Ashur made his name his own god, and then so he was up against Nimrod. Could Marduk be Nimrod? Let's go on. It will be seen that certain inferences are possible which have an important bearing on the question of the origins of civilization, nothing less than bearing on the origins of civilization. So these texts have supplied new information about the mythology dealing with Marduk and Ashur and are of two kinds. One is the fragments of the creation epic, restoring much of the previous portion of the first tablet and almost the whole of the sixth tablet, previously represented by only a few lines and translated by Sir E.A. Wallace Budge, great guy, great books, and the Babylonian legends of creation. Secondly, texts that are connected with the rites of the New Year festival called Zagmuku at Babylon in the city of Ashur. So Babylon is Nimrod's city, Ashur is Ashur's, right? And so Ashur learned from Nimrod and created his own religion. So, okay, we're starting to match up. Certain texts from Nineveh in the city of Ashur describe cult ceremonial performed at the New Year's festival. These cult acts are explained as representing mythical events connected with the story of Marduk. The king himself played the part of Marduk in this mimetic ritual. The priest, that of Nabu. And you'll see Nabu also often in the Bible. Nebuchadnezzar. While the worshippers, so Nebuchadnezzar would be like the priest of, right? While the worshippers themselves seem to have taken part in the ceremony. From these texts, the story of Marduk can be partially filled out. Wait, something just hit me. So I know we're looking at Ashur and Ashur following Nimrod, but who was, if Nimrod was the first one, which one was the one, right? Nimrod became Gibborim. And is it because of his association with Nabu? And I know that Nabu starts to match up with Mars, seemingly, right? And that Mars ties in with Apollo, Apollyon the Destroyer, the god of war. Okay, I just saw that, so carry on. Let me know if you guys have anything else on that. From these texts, the story of Marduk can be partially filled out. Some assistance can also be obtained from the ritual of this festival, which lasted during the first 12 days of Nisan. Marduk was begotten by Ea within the chambers into which the Absu, the abyss of waters, was divided. Hold on, stop, wait a minute. Where did this Apollyon Destroyer and the Beast King come up from? They rose from the abyss. They rise from the bottomless pit, right? And the abyss is within the waters, covered by the waters, right? Now, here we go. His form, now I'm wondering if they're talking about Ea or Marduk, and I'm probably talking about Ea. His form was peculiar, for he had 4 ears, 4 eyes. Probably means he's two-headed. He joined with all the gods in the great rebellion against Tiamat, other gods having refused to undertake the task of facing Tiamat and her champion Kingu. Okay, so this goes back to Apollo. Apollo defeated Python. Apollo killed the serpent supposedly, and then he became the false prophet at the Oracle of Delphi. Right, those women, those priestesses were inhaling these noxious fumes and were receiving communications many times garbled from this serpent. But Apollo became the namesake of that, and so tying that in, we have Mr. Marduk here pretending as if he's the one who killed the giant. All right, so Marduk, on the promise that his supreme position should be acknowledged, went forth to battle, paralyzed Kingu by his eye. Meaning, okay, I don't got time to go run and read a whole other tablet, and killed Tiamat in battle, ripping her up to make heaven and earth. All right, so here's his lie of a story. So just imagine Nimrod and his father Cush, being, right after the flood and having, tight access to Ham and to Noah, right? They're going to be given the story, and so what is this entity doing? He's taking the story of God and completely twisting it to make him the hero of the story, and by doing that he becomes God and ruler, and he has the best ideas, and he overcame all this, so we must follow Nimrod the rebel, is where he was going with it. Moving on. Okay, Marduk, on the promise that his supreme position should be acknowledged, went forth, paralyzed Kingu, killed Tiamat, ripping her up. So he used that to make heaven and earth. We'll also find that like in the Ymir, the Nordic Viking. Same thing, Amorites. The body of the giant was killed, destroyed to use to make heaven and earth. We have that same story being told here. Ea, who is the little g god, in order to make the ways of the gods twofold. All right, so now he's making them two-faced. So this is the symbological meaning behind what's happening, is they're becoming two-faced, like all the celebrities that we see nowadays. They're so pretty, they're your idol, but behind closed doors, they're actual, literally demons sacrificing to demons. All right, one celestial, one terrestrial is how they're going to mix it up. Ea suggests that one god be sacrificed that all might be established. Marduk held a council of the gods and asked who was the cause of strife. They replied, Kingu, and Kingu was punished. Now that traces back to, was that Cush? Did they take out Cush? Is this when Ham passed away? Very, very possible. The gods asked Marduk what gift they could make him, and he decided on the building of Babylon. Okay, now we're starting to tie into Nimrod for sure. So what Nimrod, as a gift for killing his father, or his father's father, gets to build this Tower of Babylon and gets to tell these lies. The Anunnaki themselves built the Tower of Babylon named Esagila, and when this was completed, a council of gods was held, which bestowed on Marduk the 50 names, which announced his supremacy. So this is where we got all these super, people who think the name is so important. We got to know the 50 names of God. Well, it ties into their pagan religion, these pagan words of power. I don't need pagan words of power. I have a relationship with God Almighty. I don't need to know any ritual. I don't need to know any ceremony. I don't need to know, any word outside of I love God, please be with me and save me. But, in order for them to get filthy things, filthy power, these are the things that they do. And so let's figure out what happened to Nimrod where Ashur could take over. So the creation epic is closing, and before the ritual texts enable us to learn more of the story, there is a long gap, and somewhere in this gap comes the story of the legend of the Zu bird, the Anzu bird, who's like Pazuzu, some kind of demonic thing. From this we learn that the god Zeus stole from Marduk the tablets of destiny, right? And it was essential for him to have that to run the universe. Kingu had been given these things. So Tablet of Destiny might have been the lots they drew. It might have been the covenants they made. It might have been something that he brought off the ark. This has, possibilities of what was the clothing that God gave to Adam and Eve that was passed on, that gave Nimrod this power according to ancient Jewish legends. Okay, someone remind what those things were called, the skins that God gave Adam and Eve to cover for their sins. Okay, that had power for them to rule over the animals, which made Nimrod the first, the mighty hunter of animals, and then to humans. Okay, so it's opening up a lot of things for us. Okay, and maybe the loss of the tablets led to the fall of Marduk, for the ritual text opens up with Bel, okay, Baal, Marduk, okay, is Nimrod. Interesting. It ends up with him imprisoned in the mountain, right? And that's exactly what God said he did to Azazel for his sins. That is the grave, or Sheol, the underworld, Leviticus 16. Okay, God has them take the goat out on the Day of Atonement and chuck it off a cliff, and goes and it smashes into the rocks, representative of the fallen angels being buried by mountains of cold, dark, sharp rocks. Okay, and the same punishment happened to Mr. Nimrod for playing around with the destroyer. So let's read about that same type of punishment in Ezekiel 31. Okay, what does God say to Ashur the Assyrian? Ezekiel 31, thus says the Lord God, because thou hast lifted up thyself in height, and have shot thy top among the thick boughs, and his heart is lifted up in height, I have therefore delivered him into the hand of the mighty one of the heathen. All right, all the translations will take away from the fact that it says Hebrew word, it's the El of the nations, the El of the Goyim, the God of the nations, the God of this world. The Lord delivered the son of Shem to Satan himself. Found also in the New Testament when they stole from the church what he said, when they were doing weird stuff, it said, I've delivered their flesh over to Satan, right? And he's just completely collapsed over. The trees all cry for him. He sounds like he's covered by the flood. Ryan Peterson and other awesome author did a great book that really contained a lot of this, showing that this could be a shadow, a portrayal of what happened before the flood, this great Nephilim who died, that the waters came and they wept for him, and that he was sealed, and the day it stopped raining was the day that this giant, his life was ended, and he was taken down into the deep, just like our good friend Nimrod, right? Just like our good friend Nimrod, brought down to the grave, covered by the mountains of Sheol. So back to this text. A message was sent out asking for someone to bring Marduk out. Nabu came from Borsippa to save his father. Interesting. And maybe that's our guy. Maybe Nabu is this son of Apollyon. We haven't exactly figured out if it's Nimrod because Cush did something blasphemous, or Nimrod because he did something blasphemous, or Nimrod because he had this ritual that made his child part of an angelic lineage. That's the answer I'm searching for, ultimately. So here we have an interesting name. They're looking for people to dig them out of this mountain, Nabu and Beltis. Finally, Anshar sent out a Nerda to capture the zoo bird, and he captured him. And then the gods bored through the door of the prison. So that means they bored down into the underworld to release him, which, does that tie in today? Is that what's going to happen? Because we do have what's called Cernunnos, what's the horn god all over it, which, if it's a true actual super magnet, I mean, if you can supercharge that, you're going to rip anything that's metal out of the way, because electricity, perpendicular to electrical wave, is the magnetic wave. So electricity is magnetism, and that is a strong force to be able to move mountains if you have enough energy. So it could be the new way for them to bore through the door and get out the Antichrist himself, because he's been initiating people into his mystery cults, his mystery religion, right? All of this is adding up. Here we found Mr. Nimrod. Okay, this gentleman, if you want to pause and read it, seems to think that Ashur and Marduk are the same, which is fine. I'm sticking to my hypothesis, though. But he puts out some very, very interesting stuff. He says, believes that Ashur is a cedar tree. Okay, so the Bible talks about cedars of Lebanon and the oaks of Bashan, those being representatives for what seems like Nephilim, or at least highly rebellious humans. And angels, the bulls of Bashan, were found at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. When you see in Psalms 22, that was preached by David 1,000 years before Christ. Okay, and let's look at these other very interesting things. Okay, E.A. Wallace Budge has pointed out to me a curious feature of the symbols of Osiris. Here we are back again. The Jed, below the outspreading top of the cedar, may represent the spreading, sweeping branches of a conifer. They're generally 4 bands. What do these bands represent? It is very tempting to see in them the same metal bands that are around the tree with which Ashur is connected. Perhaps it was this very feature that the Osiris myth attempted to explain by the story of a tree growing round the chest which held the body of Osiris. Should this comparison be accepted, it seems impossible for the present writer not to believe that Ashur and Osiris, whose cult objects are similar as well as their myths, have a common origin. If that's the case, then it wouldn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't that mean that Nimrod was more of the sense of Osiris, as he was the first one to die? And even the Bible, the Bible doesn't say that, but Ashur went forth. He couldn't went forth in power building Nineveh if Nimrod is right behind him in a city, less than 100 miles away, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Which I'm going to touch on this, and then I'll go to the next section. Now, if the Osiris myth in Egypt and the Marduk and Ashur myth in the Eastern River Valleys have a common origin, where did the myth originate? Certainly not in Babylon, and as we've seen, certainly not in Egypt. For the god who descended into the grave had quite a different story originally in Babylon. He was Tammuz. We find Tammuz in Ezekiel in the Bible. We find Tammuz associated with women. We just read about Ashur the Assyrian. We find the women weeping for Tammuz in front of the temple. We find supposed to be the leaders bowing down to the sun. And they say there's even worse abominations than that inside the actual temple, associating with this Nimrod, Osiris, Ashur connection involved at this period of time. So continuing on, Tammuz connected with the Ishtar cycle. The worshippers of Marduk and Babylons of the first dynasty are now universally acknowledged to have come from Amuru, the Amorites. This is the Nephilim, roughly speaking, Syria. So Syria is Aram, Amur. The Assyrians must also have come into the Euphrates and Tigris valleys from outside, for Sumerian remains have been found on the site of Kala Shakrat. So interestingly enough, that it's tying in all these things together. The city of Byblos played an important part in the Osiris myth. There seems to be some ground for the supposition that Syria was the true original home of Ashur Marduk, which is we go and look at Byblos. Okay, this right here is Mount Hermon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ugarit. This is where they found the coffin that held the body of Osiris. It wasn't down here, it's right next to Mount Hermon. We have so many things that are tying us into Mount Hermon. Here's Ugarit, where they're writing all these myths. All right, here's Cyprus, right here, where we find so many more, the most examples of this Apollyon, this Reshef. This could have been the island of Apollo, for all we know. In his myths, he was born in a place called Delos, or an island. And so to finish this episode off, let's go ahead and look at the Isagila, which is going to be talking about Ea, the father of Marduk, and Marduk himself, a temple seemingly built by Marduk. And as we look where I just came from, Isagila is next to the Entimenaki, which was the Tower of Babylon, the Tower of Babel. So it puts us in the same area, those same cities that Nimrod built, Nimrod being Marduk. Okay, and it says here the Isagila was a temple dedicated to Marduk, the protector god of Babylon. It lay south of the ziggurat Entimenaki, which seems to have been the Tower of Babylon. In this temple was a statue of Marduk surrounded by cult images of the cities that had fallen under the Babylonian Empire from the 18th century BC. There was a little lake named the Absu, right? And so this is the deep from which the spirit is pulled up from, right? And he's represented as, these things are underneath the waters. If they're underneath the earth, then probably the waters, right? And so their spirit comes out of the waters. The Abzu was a representation of Marduk's father, Enki, who was the god of the waters and lived in the Abzu that was the source of all the fresh waters. Now, if you see where I'm getting here, help me out, is this tying in Apollo to being Enki, the god of the abyss? Because that's where he's coming from. That's where he's been, in this abyss. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I know I've taken quite a long time on this. I really hope you enjoyed this. I put a lot of work into this. I still have some awesome things. Let me give you a little sneak peek of what I'll have coming. And that's going to be tying all this in biblically. I haven't even got to the fact that Reshef, the name of Apollyon, is from Seraph, which are the seraphim, which are the flying dragons around the throne of God. So I'm going to be able to get into that. And because I'm picking up Patreon subscribers, I will be putting either this on Patreon this weekend, or I found the actual, as you see when I'm going to the Tower of Babylon, I found the actual Sumerian mythology, the texts that talk about the Tower of Babel. I'm either going to make an episode on that. And then also the reason I never got to the Salvation Army this week is because I didn't realize the settings on my GoPro. I think it was after like 15 minutes or so, it would cut out. So where we do sections over 15 minutes long, unfortunately I lost it all. So we're going to have to redo that. But that's okay. God's timing is good. And I'm okay with that. No harm, no foul. So honestly, thank you all so much for watching, for being a part of the community. I'm super excited to not have to Uber this weekend. I've done it the past 2 weekends, so I got this weekend off, but I'm going to focus on videos. Let me try to get 2 Patreon videos out this weekend and figure out which one of those I want to use to make my next longer form YouTube video. And hopefully y'all can help me with that process. I would definitely appreciate it. Those links are going to be in my description. It's also free. I will start putting some more content up there that is free as well, to kind of start putting myself around, so I can basically transfer more and more from driving for Uber currently to doing videos, and that would be awesome. That'd be a dream come true, and that would be a blessing from God. So the link to that is in the description, and also we've set up our new store. An awesome commenter of ours was showing how they were advertising the last place we were on. They were giving us weird advertised stuff that would pop up on our page that we didn't really want. So we changed that to one that's used by more YouTube people, and that's Teespring, where we have our new shirts, one male, one female, sweatshirts, and a mug. That link will also be in the description. Please go check it out. So God bless you all so much. God bless you for watching. God bless your understanding. If you made it this far, I pray He blesses your week abundantly, and that hopefully He gives some of y'all, He blesses some of y'all with some amazing comments, questions, facts that you found, because God really has used a lot of that to help me in my studies, and it's been a beautiful thing, just like we saw around Saturn's eye and how that connected as basically in the midst of finishing this video. So leave your questions, comments, and I'll see you next week, Patreon this weekend, and until then, peace.